Welcome to the 4Q podcast. My name is Sheena Schuy. I'm a therapist who specializes in anxiety, burnout, and relationship issues, and truthfully, all the underlying stuff that brings that forward. I'm also a business coach. So in this podcast, we talk all things life, business, love, relationships, and everything in between. So let's get into today's episode. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the 4Q podcast. Today I'm going to reshare an episode that I did with the incredible Dr. Hilary that is coming out soon, all about burnout and women and why we're all burnt out and motherhood. And even if you're not a woman, I go deep in actually understanding our human history and why we're all burnt out. So without further ado, I am going to leave this intro and put that episode on, but I always love to hear from you. If you got a lot out of that episode, make sure you message me, make sure you get in contact. I'd love to hear from you. And of course, I don't usually ask this, but if you leave a positive Google review or a positive podcast review, that always helps spread this message to the audiences. It helps people find us so that more and more people can start feeling like they're not the problem and actually understand that our societal ways of being are more likely the reason that they're burnt out. All right, let's get into it.
Welcome, Sheena. Thank you so much for joining me today to talk all about burnout and how we can shift our lifestyles to create a more fulfilling life. But before we dive in, can you let me know one thing that you've done today to take care of you?
Yeah, I went for an hour-long walk, and that was so good. That's definitely the time when ideas drop in, when I'm, regulating my cortisol, when I'm taking care of my hormones. We can't always do that around kids. It's tough, but this morning I didn't have the kids, so I was able to just do that with the sunlight, before the day, try to reset my hormones. Yeah, that was the thing.
That's an incredible way to start the day. I can't think of a better way.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we can't always do that when the kids are in the bed with us and we're going to wake them up. But today was one of those mornings where I didn't have to do that, so I was able to get that done.
Amazing. So can you share a little bit about you and what it is that you do? Because you do so much. I'd love to hear.
Yeah, and it's so lovely being on this podcast with you again because I think we connected maybe almost 4 years ago now, 3.5, 4 years ago, which seems wild because I've had another baby since then. Like everything's happened since then. You've moved countries, crazy, but so back then, when we first connected, I was the holistic therapist. And so I was very focused on really having that holistic support for women, for, individuals and couples and families. And then since then, it's very much evolved. So I changed niches a couple of times. So what happened was I became the therapist for burnout and anxiety in women. So obviously a lot of women, a lot of the burnout and anxiety really hits ahead after motherhood. It's like you've ignored it this long and you cannot ignore it anymore. But then what happened is I took a year off. So I had a baby, I took a year off, and I had to, I really had time to reflect during mat leave. And that's when I really pivoted towards more business coaching because what I found was my business gave me the flexibility and the time schedule needed. So it's almost like therapy helped me figure out the parts of myself, the experiences that I had that really contributed to my anxiety and burnout, which was, for a lot of us, it's past trauma that we're not aware of. So I was able to process that. But at the end of the day, if you're not changing your daily routines, changing your daily rituals, changing your lifestyle, you're always going to kind of be burnt out. But, that capitalistic society we live in, it's hard to just go to therapy and feel good. Like, that's not enough. You kind of have to take the next step of choosing a life you want to live. And that's hard. It's hard when most workplaces aren't flexible around mothers. When I went back to working part time after having my second son, there were some comments about reliability because I am the default parent. I was the default parent, and so if he was sick, I had took the day off. I was breastfeeding. I was doing those things, and so it just kind of clicked that when I went all in on my business, it's like, wow, that's the thing that's giving me the time freedom, the schedule, the flexibility around my time, and how I can actually serve many more people. Like, it's one thing to serve people one on one, but as you would know from having this podcast, if 50 people listen to this podcast, you can't see 50 one-on-one clients in a day. So it's like I'm actually able to have a bigger impact. I have more flexibility with my time. I don't have to report to some asshole boss who is like, oh, well, you're out of sick leave and you're taking sick leave again. Like, no, so that's kind of where I'm at now, where I'm still at heart will always be an anxiety and burnout therapist, but it's more evolved into we mash it all together with personal development and business development. I really want women to see that if you be brave enough to put your skills, your knowledge into a business, you'll have that flexibility that really does lead to more freedom and less burnout, less anxiety. So that was a really long way of saying that's what I do now.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. And I think you're right. There's only so far that talking about what's holding you back and past traumas and all sorts of things is going to get you. But then you're taking that next step of actually implementing and changing your day to day by shifting your business. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and what you do, because at the end of the day, even if we were working together and you're working a 40-hour week, let's say you're a client and you're really anxious, really burnt out, got kids, and you're saying to me, "Oh, Sheena, I work 40 hours a week," or even hypothetically, you work 3 days a week. There's the commute, there's the pressure from work because a lot of workplaces will still expect you to perform at the level you were pre-kid or even more than that because you're advancing your career, you're getting older, all of that, you should be performing at a higher level. So we could be doing all the most amazing work in the world, but and you could be on those 2 days off, you could be going for walks and seeing friends and all of that, and that's definitely going to help. But you're still going to have that pressure from that workplace, the feeling of I have to step into somebody that really I'm not anymore. It when you're not aligned like that, it takes its toll.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think so many people listening can relate to that. So let's
Yeah.
talk about mothers. Like modern day moms are so burnt out. It's so common, unfortunately. And they're not the only ones that are burnt out. Like so are so many people in the Western world. But it's impossible to do all the things that we're expected to as a mom, like work full time, clean, cook, chauffeur, take care of the kids, somehow fit in me time. And we're often doing this with little support and little community. We're even constantly on devices and comparing what we're doing to other people and what they're doing. It's just all burning us out. So,
Mm.
what do we do? Like, all in all, we are living in this world that's not aligned with how humans, especially mothers, are supposed to live. Like, how are humans supposed to live? Like, why don't we go back there first? And then can
Mm.
you answer after that? Like, why are we living so differently to how we are genetically meant to live?
Yeah. So if you look at anthropology studies, or, if anyone has ever read that book, Sapiens, which is a great book, it really talks about the evolution of society. So first we were hunter gatherers, Then we were in that agricultural phase, and then we were in the industrial revolution. And you might go, what has that got to do with modern day motherhood and all of that? But what we find is pre Christianity, pre all of that, when we were hunter gatherers, we were at one with each other. Men and women were actually quite equal. So we don't really see the patriarchal men over women kind of thing until Christianity spread. And this is not a discussion about religion and its pros and cons. You know, I know lots of feminist men who are also Christians, and like equality across both. Like, this is not a discussion about all of that, right? But what it is that I guess historically we did find that when the agriculture happened and Christianity started to spread, previous to that, pagan cultures, indigenous cultures, we all lived in community, lived in tribes. Women had yarning time, men had yarning circles. You know, there was the men time, the women time. We celebrated the moon, you know, the summer solstice, the winter solstice. Like, there was festivals and celebrations, and we were at one with the land. We were at one with each other. Then what you see is a shift to Christianity where we are above nature. God created the world for us. And so that's when we start taking ownership of the land. We start owning it rather than working with it. So that's where you see people starting to do farming and all of that. But what also happened during that time is men started to own women. You know, Eve came from Adam's rib. So it was almost like a further separation. You can start to see how the culture really shifts from this very communal, at one, sustainable culture to agriculture where it's like, how much can we harvest? It's not about sustainability, it's more about how much can we start to get. But it was still somewhat level, like we want to produce enough that it's that bartering system of, okay, we produce potatoes, I'm going to barter with you, you've got pigs, I'm going to barter with you, you've got cheese, milk. You know, it's still bartering. It's not what we used to have, but it's not what we know today. Then what we find is the industrial revolution, so capitalism basically, come in around the 1800s, you know, machinery, all of that. This is all, and you know, 1700s as well. And this is a lot of where colonization happened as well, where how can I get as much as I can and resources, and that real status came of who can have the most. Oh, if you dress a certain way, if you have the most money, like in the Western world, that was what was happening. In the Eastern world, they were still very much in the bartering system where they weren't quite as removed, and they still had a lot of the traditions of respecting the land, respecting each other. They didn't have that Western mentality of take, 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 which is often why a lot of more passive cultures, more loving cultures, were colonized by those who were more powerful. So you find a lot of indigenous cultures who were taken over by the English or the French or whatever. They were quite loving and passive people. They didn't think to protect themselves because they weren't struggling for resources. They're like, there's enough for everyone. And again, you still might be thinking, well, what has this got to do with modern day burnout in women? The cultural, that capitalism broke down communities. Instead of it being all of us together, all of us sustainably supporting each other, like there wasn't this, I'm not going to have enough money, because what do we buy with money? We buy food, we buy shelter, you know, we do celebrations like festivals, like, you know, joyful things. We have to buy that now, but it used to be just part of what we did. And so when capitalism comes in, it's like, who's got the most? It's me versus you, because there's this limited mindset of, if there's a set amount of resources, I've got to have more than you, rather than we all have enough for everyone all of the time. So it's kind of this more, more, more mentality, rather than how can we just all live sustainably? And so that's kind of where it is. And that's why I'm passionate about building sustainable businesses, because that's where we all support each other. Anyone who works with me or for me, they're going to have enough. Like, I'm not going to exploit them to get ahead. I mean, what is the point in that? Whereas you do find a lot of capitalistic ideas of, exploit lesser cultures, less wealthy people to get richer. Like, it's just a toxicity that ends up breaking down communities and breaking down the village. Without a village, we're burnt out. We're not meant to cook on our own, clean on our own. We're not meant to do all the things on our own. We're meant to, yes, sit in circles with women and have our aunties and cousins and sisters with us. Our kids are just meant to be playing together. Like, we're not meant to entertain our kids 24/7. Like, they're meant to be playing with other kids. They're meant to learn social dynamics through different ages playing with each other. That's the thing that's broken down. And you still see that in a lot of the blue zones, the places in the world that live the longest. They still have a very sustainable land connection, community connection. Kids play with each other. The kids take care of the elderly while mum and dad are working. Like, it's intergenerational. They have the village. Yeah, so they don't have to buy it. They may have less money than the West, but they're so much richer in so many different ways, which is why they're living to 100, these blue zones, right? So that is that's a big reason why women in the West are burnt out. We're working 40 hours a week. We don't have support. We've got to buy everything, and we always feel like we're in survival, like it's me versus you. If I don't have enough money, I'm not eating. If I don't have enough money, the kids are in daycare, which means I have to support them. If I don't have enough money, I can't pay for their sport. I can't pay for their school. I can't pay for that. Whereas in other cultures, that's just part of it, you know?
Yeah, there's so much there, isn't there? And it highlights how like, you have highlighted the history of what's brought us to this problem nowadays of burnout. But what do we do? Like, we're in this society. We can't just all move to a blue zone or go back in time. Like, what do we do with these constraints of capitalism and a consumerist society in the West to help us as best we can, given like our realities as moms?
I think first of all, it's not giving up hope. Like, I think it's very easy to give up hope that replicating that in some way is not doable. So, in the actual, and I didn't even realize this, but I only recently watched the Netflix documentary series on the Blue Zones. It came out last year, but I didn't watch it straight away. But what they did is they actually implemented it in some towns in the US, of trying to implement things like walking groups together, and intergenerational things, and people connecting with their food, so like learning how to grow it and harvesting it together. And again, that might seem very far-fetched, like how can we do that in an urban city? What it's about is, if we know that's the goal, we can advocate to our governments, to our society, to actually create that. I'm a big advocate of, I feel like community gardens would solve the world, because, you know, kids would learn how food is grown, it's organic, fresh food. It would save us money from buying it from grocery stores. Like, if we all just paid $10 a week to be part of a community initiative and we had it. But also, it helps people connect. Like, we used to have a lot of shared spaces where we would see, your neighbors, your friends' grandparents, your friends' aunties. Like, everyone was interconnected. Whereas nowadays, I don't know my neighbors. I don't know who's related to who. I only know, like, my friends who I went to high school, or like people who I've worked with, maybe people I've networked with and intentionally gone out and met. But actually organically meeting people nowadays is incredibly difficult, which is why dating is so difficult nowadays too, because it's just not intermingled. Like, I think even in the 80s and 90s, I feel like we're maybe the last ones who really felt that intermingling in the West, you know? So I think that keeping hope that if we know that's what we want, we can advocate for that. So government policy, but that's bigger level stuff. That really where it should be coming from. On an individual level for burnout, it's actually going, okay, maybe I can't replicate the community always, but what are the things that, if I look at my ancestors, what did they do? Okay, well, they got their kids to play with other kids. They hung around other women in the same space. They, you know, connected with nature. They connected with their food. They had spiritual practices. And again, you don't have to be religious or spiritual, but it's kind of finding a way to feel like you're connected to something bigger, whether that's, you know, for a lot of people, it's just when I swim in the ocean, I feel at one with the ocean. It doesn't have to be like a huge meditative practice or like smudging your house with sage or something. It can be those little incremental things that on Fridays I journal my thoughts. That's a spiritual practice. That's a ritual that every Friday you're checking in with yourself. So those are the things as well that they might seem small or insignificant, or you know, how does that really affect us? But if your biology and your evolution and your DNA was in that lifestyle, it only makes sense that living in that lifestyle will reduce your burnout. And not just burnout, if we're real about it, like all other mental health that's going on for you.
Yeah. So what you're saying is on a higher level, talking to our governments and advocating for societal change, but individually, we can do things that are like big and small, like just writing in your journal once a week. That's a ritual that is doable because I guess I'm concerned with burnout that you don't want to add the pressure of doing more things when people are already feeling so overwhelmed and exhausted and burnt out. So I like that idea of adding in these things that are really small. And I wonder if even if there's ways to incorporate some of the things together, like getting together with friends at the community gardens or going for your walks or your swims in the ocean with other people. So you're doing more, you're combining the things. So you're not just adding on 10,000 more items to your to-do list, but you're adding on maybe one or two.
Yeah, and even there have been some studies about actually just being in community spaces. So there's neurologically and I don't know if you want to look at this from a spiritual perspective too, but certainly from a neurological and biological perspective, being in public spaces like libraries, like, you know, public parks where you may not be mingling with the other people there, but you are around other people and other people doing things. Even that can be helpful because I think, you know, you would have experienced this too in the therapeutic space of it's one thing to say create that village or reach out to your village, but there are often women who will go, Sheena, I don't have anyone. I don't, my friends are overseas, my family's overseas, or my family's interstate or whatever, you know, and I haven't worked here. We only moved here 2, 3 years ago. Like sometimes it can feel very lonely and isolating. So even just being in public spaces can help. And then it is being brave enough to go to a networking meeting, to go to a mums and bubs group, to go to a yoga thing, you know, really actually intentionally, again, almost like you're dating, thinking to yourself, okay, who are my people? What are the, you know, do I want friends who are into gardening or yoga, or, you know, what kind of women do I like and where do those women hang out? And going to those places if you can, which I know if you're at home with the kids can be tricky because you've always got the kids in tow. But nowadays there are so many mums and bubs spaces that I think it's being brave. Like we all feel awkward putting ourselves out there and trying to make adult friendships and going to these spaces, but it's having the bravery to do so. It will really transform your life and your mental health.
Yeah, and it gets easier the more that you do it. The first time it's terrifying, but the 10th or 20th time it's awkward, but not that bad, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Are there any other ways that you suggest that we can build community, or like personally for you, what do you do to build community or deepen the connections that you already have?
Yeah, so I think that's the thing is that that's another reason that business has been so powerful for me. Like having my own business, and helping other women with that is that I pay to play, so I pay to be part of some business communities, but they are the women that like, oh my gosh, you did your first reel? Look at you go. Or like, you did your first Instagram live? That's wonderful, right? Because I can't necessarily go to my friends and family for that, unfortunately. But, I go to my friends and family for other things. And my business also allows me to see them more. So last year we went to Canada as well for a month because, at the end of the day, some of my uncles and aunties have passed and they're aging, my mum's siblings and that kind of thing. And I could have the choice to spend the money, take the time now and go see them, or not, at the risk of never doing it again. You just never know. And so I could not do that if I was completely working for someone else. Like that's the thing is that I have that flexibility. I had an uncle come up a month ago, just randomly from Melbourne, my uncle and auntie. And again, I only found out a day or two before they were up here that they were going to be here. So I was able to just quickly take some time off, didn't have to reschedule much and see them because I'm intentional about that. So that's why I think I pay to be in community spaces too. So again, I'm going to a networking event really soon for International Women's Day. I sometimes you have to pay to be in those spaces, but again, like I have my friends and family, and nowadays I'm not scared of being alone in a public space. So sometimes, yeah, I'll just go out and there's a jetty nearby, and I'll just go for a walk on the jetty, and I'm not with anyone or whatever, but it's nice to be around people and watching kids play and listening to the music, being really mindful in that space. All of that really does make such an impact.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Those micro connections that you have when you're out in public spaces, and then those deep, meaningful connections that you have when you're traveling to go see people. But I love that your business is giving you that freedom. So could you tell us a little bit more about that freedom? Because it sounds amazing. And I just wonder, like, how do people h- like explain to us how we can run a business and have more freedom to be like present and involved in our families and in doing the things that are important in our lives. Like, how does that happen?
Yeah, I think most of us have worked in corporations or organizations where it's just so inefficient. We just go, oh my gosh, this is so frustrating. There's 20 better ways you could be doing this. And also realizing that the people at the top, you know, they're not smarter than you, they're not more intelligent than you, they're not more skilled than you. All it is that they just have enough bravery to go there, or they just climb the corporate ladder, or they maybe have connections that got them there. And so I think it's being brave enough to even dip your toe in. I think when we first met, you and I first met, we were part of a business group where we weren't sort of all in, but we were like dipping our toe in. So I know back then I was still working for other people, but I was experimenting with Instagram. I was experimenting with building my own community of, I'm going to start an Instagram about holistic psychology. And what does that mean to me? What do I stand for? So I ended up building my own community through that, regardless of the business side, like again, the money and the offers and stuff. I got to build a community through my business as well, which has been a double whammy. But I guess it's just asking yourself, what what am I passionate about? What do I love to do? And how can I make money doing that? Because I can guarantee there is some life coach out there who's doing what you want to do somewhere, or there's, someone in their 20s who's just gone and done it, I have a couple of friends who were marketers for a really long time, excellent at what they did, made other people millions of dollars in their businesses, and yet, they were on 100 grand, which is still good. It's not bad money working full time or whatever, but having the bravery to do their own thing. And now they approach sort of engineering firms, one contract, 25,000. Like they only need 4 contracts a year to replace their full-time 40-hour week income. And let's be real, it's not 40 hours, it's commuting to work, it's getting changed, it's getting ready, and on the weekends thinking about, did I email that person? Oh, what have I got next week coming up? The mental energy that goes for the pressure of working for someone else. And don't get me wrong, as business owners, we think about things often too, but it's not in the same draining kind of a way, because we get to do it our way, not with someone else's rigid, agenda.
Yeah. So what sort of advice would you give a mom who is dabbling like we were like 4 years ago, and they want to create a business and they want to go all in, but they're not 100% there yet, and they might still be in the traditional 9 to 5? What would you tell
Yeah.
her?
I would say just get out there. Like we both were, we paid to be part of a community, and it was just a small membership. I've been in much larger coaching since then, but it was a mums in business membership. But it was great just hearing other people's stories, and even going to networking events and actually going, oh, so tell me a bit about your business and how you started. Most people actually said, "Oh, well, after I had kids, I realized that the working for someone else wasn't going to work." I feel like on my podcast and so many of the business owners I know, that's what did it. It's like, oh, I can't work 40 hours a week. There's too much expectation. Now I've got to do it. So I really think it's asking yourself, if I had to do something now and it's going to light me up, what do I want to do? Who are the clients I want to work with? Because similarly to our field, right? So we both, do therapy and psychology and that kind of thing, social work. And for us, if we were to work for someone else, I might see all sorts of presentations for all sorts of issues and have to do all sorts of things every single day. Whereas when I started my own private practice, and similarly to you, I can I can see the people I want to see. If there's presentations that I don't feel comfortable with, or I feel someone else could better serve, I can say, "Oh, sorry, I'm not the right person for you, but you know who is this person." Doing that really just is so much better. So it's really just asking yourself, what are the skills I use in my job, and how can I do that in my own business? How can I create, like, be a subcontractor? How can I approach other businesses? Another thing that you really can do is thinking about your skill set and literally just going to large corporations and going, hey, this is my skills, and I'm this, I'm that. So maybe you say, oh, I've been in marketing for 12 years, my skills are really in business to business marketing. If your team or anyone is looking for support, let me know. I'm looking, or if there's any particular things that you need. So sometimes you don't need a website. As much as I say this, there are ways that if you just want to be curious for yourself, it's literally approaching people who might fit your skill set and go, hey, like, if you need anything, or is there something that you're needing right now, let me know if I can help. And all of a sudden they might go, oh, actually, we've been working with this company for ages, and it hasn't been working out, but we would love to sort of get you in for the day and see what we could do together. Next thing, they're like, we need this program. Next thing, you create it. Next thing, you do it again for someone else. And all of a sudden, you now know what your business is going to be. So I think it's just at the end of the day, it all comes back to just not being scared to go after it and putting yourself out there, and also realizing it's not going to come to you. Like, you actually have to go after it. And as much as we talk about not rushing and chasing in a capitalist society, this is different. It's like, I'm going to do this for me. I am worthy of this chase. I am worthy of going, I have a dream and I'm going to go after it. That's the bravery that comes with starting a business.
Yes, that bravery piece and taking action is so important because you can plan and plan and try and do everything perfectly and learn what every coach out there is telling you to do. But if you don't actually take action, nothing happens, does it?
No, no, you're so true. And actually, it just makes me laugh because one of my business coaches, who in a completely different field, but she is just on fire. And mind you, she doesn't have kids and all the things. So she's got a little bit of extra time up her sleeve. But one of her sayings is action takers are money makers. So it's true, and money, yes, it's helpful. But what we're saying is, like, if you make more money in less time. And we're not saying you have to be some billionaire asshole either. But what we are saying is that if you're used to making 100K in your corporate job, how can I make 100K in my business working 20 hours a week? Like, that is an excellent goal. And then you can make more than that later. But it's just buying my time back and still maintaining the same level of lifestyle or house or whatever that I'm used to.
Yeah, and that comes back to that freedom, doesn't it? That's the freedom of time and having the same amount of money. So, yeah, that sounds like something that we would all want, right?
Exactly.
So, based on what we have talked about here with burnout and how our society is set up and business, so many different things, one or two, what are one or two simple strategies that moms can do to like reduce burnout
Mhm.
starting today?
Yeah, starting today, I would definitely think, working with someone like yourself, where we're actually looking at, that, like we spoke about, there's societal drivers of burnout, but there's also internal drivers. So, I've got a free quiz on my website that you can check out, and I know you've got a ton of resources too, but there's the societal part, but there's also our own stuff. So the reasons that you burn out might be different to the reasons that I burn out. And I think it's important to know your personality type to understand that. So, for example, some people burn out because they do too much for others, the people pleasing, the I never say no to people, right? I burn out for other reasons. So I'm good at saying no to other people, but I can work too much. So that's a different kind of burnout where I'm trying to do all the things, not for other people, for my family and me, but that's a different kind of thing where it versus the people pleaser who is very much like they're burning out and someone goes, "Oh, I'm moving next weekend. Do you think you could help me?" "Yeah, of course I'll help you." "Oh, do you think you could mind my kids?" Like of course I can mind them. And it's like, well, when are you doing something for you? So I think that's a really good place to start, is actually going, how am I actually contributing to this? And often we don't know that until we work with a therapist or we start to do that personal development. But I think ultimately, burnout is not just doing too much for other people or generally doing too much work, too much this. It's not doing enough for yourself. And yes, you can say, oh, working out's good. And I said that at the beginning, I did that workout. We need to do things that are just for joy. So going for a stroll versus an exercise workout, for example. Like, I just love going for a walk in nature. The bonus is I'm getting extra steps in, but that's not the purpose of it. I'm just going for joy. Same with, I'm just listening to music. music has no purpose other than joy. Whereas, if I had to choose between listening to music or a podcast, and we love our podcast, but there's still a productive element to it of I'm trying to grow myself, I'm trying to learn something, as opposed to just do stuff for joy. Go for a swim in the pool, go sunbathe, go do something just for joy. And again, doing those things your inner child would love. If your inner child, if you think about them and they're like, oh, they would love having pancakes on a Sunday, or, going for strawberry ice cream or whatever, go do that. Like, go do that. That is so healing in and of itself, and so refreshing. That's what I would be starting with, if you're feeling burnt out too, is doing those things.
Yes, joy is so important, and it's something that isn't necessarily like valued in our society. We want to be productive and busy and being there for other people, on and on. But yes, having that joy and doing things just for that purpose is probably missing from a lot of moms' lives, because we do get busy doing all the things that we need to do. So I love that. I'm going to do something for joy today. I have to think of what it is. Maybe ice cream.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like we associate it with laziness, and that's why we resist, because so many of us were conditioned to, like, oh, that's what lazy people do. Like, lazy has such a negative connotation in our society too, of people who just go and have fun. Oh, they're not pushing hard enough. They're lazy. And it's like, no. And that's again why working with the therapist is so helpful, and working with someone like yourself, because if we grew up in a household where you never saw your mum and dad do joy, they never relaxed. Or if you were a teenager and you actually just were chilling on the couch watching TV, and they go, turn this off, go do this, go do that, go do something productive. You get told, okay, people don't really care about me or appreciate joy or rest. They only value me when I'm doing. They only value me when they're going to see me as lazy if I actually just chill out. My thing is, go watch Netflix, go scroll TikTok. I do not care. If you're just doing it because you feel good, go do that. I think there's too much perfectionism around screens are bad, this is bad. If our society was set up differently, yeah, of course we wouldn't have screens, but we got to deal with the society we have today. So, working with the therapist around that perfectionism and undoing the conditioning that rest and joy are lazy, or, not good for you somehow. Yeah, takes a lot of work to get there.
Yeah, but it's so needed. Like, our nervous systems will never be regulated if we don't bring that joy and that rest and relaxation into it. And play too, those are all so critical. And yeah, they're not valued by our society, but that doesn't mean that they're not essential for us. And I think when you become a mom or you become burnt out, you realize that those things need to come back in your life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, what books or resources would you recommend to listeners if they want to learn more about what we talked about today, including your own? Like, if there's, I know like your podcast and like you do some amazing work with people. And are there any other resources outside of yours that you recommend?
Yeah, absolutely. I really love, so Johan Hari is amazing. He wrote the book called Stolen Focus, which was quite big, I think, last year or the year before. Just about how it's mostly based on the epidemic of ADHD and how so many of us relate to that. But a lot of his work talks about all the stuff we're talking about, you know. So his story, and you can watch his TED talk, which is amazing. I think it's probably like a decade old now, still so good though. Where he talks about, he was on the highest level of medication for anxiety and depression and was still anxious and depressed. And it wasn't really until he started, yeah, like doing all these lifestyle interventions, that stuff shifted and he completely came off the medication. So I think things like that are a great place to start. I'm just thinking if there's any other books that I really love. All of them, I think, the ones that are coming to mind are more like therapeutic type books. But I think realizing that, and even the book Sapiens, I mean, so that's by Yuval Noah Harari, very similar names, but that book talks about this anthropological stuff we talked about. It's a big book, it's really thick, but I think if you're already in this space, it'll just really transform the way you look at how we live now. Because I think that was the book that really painted the clear picture of where we are. And he also talks about the next revolution of the artificial intelligence revolution, right? So we've gone through the hunter gatherers, farming, industrial. We're literally in the new age, and what the trials and tribulations that come with that.
Yeah, we shall see. And tell us about your resources. So, your podcast and where people can work with you, and a bit about what you do specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's been a bit of a change. So now we run the 20-hour Business Week Academy, which really is it's a community space for sure, but it's definitely a space where I will work with you both on your business and personally. So if you already own a business, that's the space for you. If you don't, come just hang out on Instagram. I'm pretty active on Instagram, so that's my main hangout. And same, like you mentioned, I've got the podcast called the 4Q Podcast, where I'm just being real and raw and honest. I think that's something I'm definitely leaning into more this year. Of I'm just going to say it. I'm not holding back anymore. I think you and I as therapists, we're so bred into not really showing ourselves and not really being ourselves, or this fear of, oh my gosh, they're going to take my registration. I made so much money without, you know, it's just coaching really, that I don't even have to do, quote unquote therapy anymore. That I'm not scared of using my voice, because at the end of the day, me using my voice has impact. So if you want to hang out, yeah, Instagram's the place, the podcast, the Business Academy if you're a business owner. I'm also dabbling on TikTok, so you can find me over there. Same handle, Sheena Holistic Therapist. But yeah, that's my main hangouts.
Amazing. I'm with you. I remember in my PhD, just that being drilled into me that there's no self-disclosure at all ever in sessions. And it took me a while to unlearn that and realize that it's actually very therapeutic to be a real person to the people you work with and show your
I love
flaws and
it.
imperfections, right?
I remember the first time I posted a picture of my boys on my Instagram going, oh, I'm so unprofessional. Look at me. Like, or showing my behind the scenes life of like my dog, or showing up with my hair in a bun, like not actually in work attire, like actually just showing up as the mum that I am. I just remember all these things that I don't give a shit about now. Even swearing, I still I feel the hesitance come up when I go to swear. But the reality is, like, when I'm with my friends, my family, I swear, I'm Australian, I'm a Queenslander, that's part of the culture. So all of that takes so much unconditioning, it makes me laugh. But those are the things that people go, Sheena, like, I see myself in you, and I'm so thankful that you're sharing this.
Yeah, exactly. People don't connect with fake people or people trying to be perfect, right? It's not a real thing. So is there anything that you would like to share with us, or anything that I didn't ask that you wanted me to ask?
No, no, I think that's good. And I mean, something I forgot to mention was, I would definitely recommend your book, that Motherhood Reset. I think that's just such a valuable resource. And I remember, speaking to you as you were writing it and creating it and bringing this beautiful thing into the world. And I know that you and I have a very similar mindset around that. So I think any woman who's in these stages and that postnatal depletion and all of that, would really benefit from that book too.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It was so lovely to connect with you again. It's been ages since we chatted, so thank you so much for this conversation.
Oh, as always, it's always a fun time when we connect because I think we're just, yeah, so similar in so many ways. And the Australian Canadian connection as well is always like nice. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so lovely to connect with you again today.